You're standing in the grocery store, staring at a wall of 100 different cereal boxes. You've been scrolling through Netflix for 20, maybe 40 minutes, only to give up and watch nothing. You're trying to pick a restaurant for dinner, and the sheer number of options on your food delivery app feels less like a gift and more like a crushing weight. Sound familiar? It's that uniquely modern feeling of being stuck, overwhelmed by a sea of possibilities. We've been told our whole lives that more choice is the ultimate freedom. More options mean more opportunity, more control, and ultimately more happiness. But what if it's a lie? What if the endless choices we face every day are actually a carefully laid trap? A trap designed not to liberate us, but to keep us overwhelmed, dissatisfied, and anxious. What if this promised land of abundance is the very thing standing in the way of our happiness? There's a name for this feeling: the paradox of choice. The concept was famously introduced by psychologist Barry Schwartz, and it argues that while some choice is good, more choice isn't always better. In fact, past a certain point, too many options can lead to less satisfaction, more anxiety, and complete decision paralysis. This idea feels wrong because it cuts against one of our most sacred beliefs, that the path to a better life is paved with more options. We see choice as the engine of freedom. Businesses think offering more products makes customers happier. Perhaps the most famous illustration of this is the jam study from psychologists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper. They set up a tasting booth for gourmet jams in a supermarket. On one day, they offered a huge selection of 24 different jams. On another day, they offered a much smaller selection of just 6. The results were fascinating. The big display with 24 jams attracted more people, who were drawn to the spectacle of abundance. But when it came to actually buying the jam, the small display won by a landslide. Of the people who stopped at the booth with 6 jams, about 30% made a purchase. Of those who stopped at the booth with 24 jams, only 3% bought a jar. Let that sink in. A dramatic increase in choice didn't lead to more sales. It led to paralysis. Overwhelmed, most people chose nothing at all. And the few who did manage to pick from the larger display reported feeling less satisfied with their choice. Now, this isn't just about jam. It's about everything. It's the 50 types of milk in the dairy aisle: cow, almond, soy, oat, macadamia, on and on. It's the hundreds of shows released every month. It's the endless stream of potential partners on a dating app. It's the thousands of career paths and side hustles we see glorified online, each one promising a better version of us. We are living in an era of unprecedented abundance, with more choices than any group of people in history. This was supposed to be liberating. It was meant to give us the power to perfectly tailor our lives to our desires. Instead, it has created a silent epidemic of stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. It has become a burden. The promise of freedom has become a cage. So what is going on in our brains? Why do we short-circuit when presented with too many options? It comes down to a few key psychological traps that turn the promise of abundance into a source of real pain. First, there's decision fatigue. Your ability to make good, thoughtful decisions is a finite resource, like a muscle. Every choice you make, no matter how small, wears that muscle out. Which coffee to buy, what to wear, which email to answer first. Each one is a small tax on your brain. When you face an overwhelming number of options, that tax skyrockets. This is why, after a long day at work, you find yourself mindlessly scrolling your phone, unable to even decide on dinner. Your decision-making muscle is spent. Second is the toxic combination of opportunity cost and regret. When you choose one thing, you are, by definition, not choosing all the other things. The benefits of the options you rejected are the opportunity costs. With 2 options, that's easy to manage. But with 50, the number of missed opportunities becomes a huge, invisible weight. You might pick a fantastic vacation, but your mind is haunted by the features of the 20 others you didn't choose. The perfect beach of one, the amazing food of another. You end up creating a fantasy alternative in your head, a perfect combination of all the things you gave up. And this fantasy makes your actual, real-world choice feel inadequate. This leads directly to regret. The more options you had, the easier it is to feel you made a mistake. You second-guess yourself, wondering if another path would have made you happier. This feeling can corrode the satisfaction you get from your decision, even if it was a great one. Third, a world of choice leads to an escalation of expectations. If you only have 2 options for headphones, you're just hoping for something good enough. But when the world offers you 100 different kinds, you don't just expect them to be good. You expect them to be perfect. The assumption is that with so many choices, the perfect one must exist, and it's your job to find it. This pressure turns a simple purchase into a high-stakes hunt. And since perfection is an impossible standard, you're almost always setting yourself up for disappointment. As Barry Schwartz says, the reason that everything was better back when everything was worse is that when everything was worse, it was actually possible for people to have experiences that were a pleasant surprise. Finally, all of this culminates in choice paralysis. This is the jam study in action. It's the feeling of being so overwhelmed by the sheer volume of options that you freeze, unable to decide at all. You spend 45 minutes trying to pick a movie and end up watching nothing. You want to learn a new skill, but are paralyzed by the endless online courses, so you learn nothing. You want to invest your money, but the thousands of options are so intimidating that you just leave it sitting in the bank. This isn't just indecision. It's a systemic avoidance where the anxiety of choosing is so great that doing nothing feels like the easiest path. Okay, so how do we fight back? This isn't about rejecting modern life. It's about learning to navigate it with wisdom. It's about becoming the architect of your own choices. The single most powerful shift you can make is to change your entire decision-making philosophy. Barry Schwartz identifies two types of people: maximizers and satisficers. A maximizer feels compelled to make the absolute best possible choice. They have to check every option and read every review to make sure they aren't missing out. While this sounds smart, research often finds that maximizers, despite all their efforts, end up feeling more stressed, unhappy, and prone to regret. They are the primary victims of the paradox of choice. A satisficer, on the other hand, isn't looking for the best. They're looking for good enough. A satisficer has a list of criteria. They look at their options, and as soon as they find one that meets their standards, they choose it and move on. They don't worry about some theoretical, slightly better option around the corner. They found what they needed, and that's enough. So, the first strategy is to consciously become a satisficer. Before you decide, define what good enough looks like. If you need a blender, decide on your budget and the 2 features you absolutely need. Ignore everything else. Find the first one that fits your criteria and buy it. This one shift can lift an enormous weight. Second, set artificial constraints. Since the world no longer gives us natural limits, we have to create our own. Looking for a new job? Decide you'll only apply to 5 companies that truly excite you. Choosing a restaurant? Limit your search to a 5-block radius or the first 10 results on the app. These self-imposed rules aren't about deprivation. They are tools for focus. Third, automate your decisions with routines. We waste so much mental energy on low-stakes decisions. What's for breakfast? What should I wear? Make the decision once and put it on autopilot. This is why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. He didn't want to waste a single drop of cognitive fuel on his clothes. Create a simple meal plan. Lay out your clothes the night before. Automating the small stuff frees up your mind for the choices that actually matter. Fourth, make your decisions irreversible, at least in your head. A huge part of the anxiety comes from second-guessing. We keep the door open to changing our minds, so we never fully commit to what we've chosen. Once you decide, mentally close the door. Tell yourself it's final. Stop researching alternatives. When you remove the option of reversal, your brain can finally stop the what-if game and start finding happiness in the reality of your choice. Finally, distinguish between high-stakes and low-stakes decisions. Not all choices are equal. Choosing a life partner or a career deserves serious thought. Choosing a brand of toothpaste does not. Yet we often apply the same agonizing, maximizing mindset to both. Stop giving toothpaste the same mental energy you'd give to a mortgage. For any low-stakes decision, give yourself a 60-second time limit. Pick something and move on. By using these strategies, you can start to push back against the overwhelming tide of modern life and move from paralysis to purposeful action. I'm curious, where do you feel the most decision fatigue in your life? Is it your career, your finances, or something as simple as what to watch next? I think we can all learn from each other. But these strategies are about more than just making life easier. They point to a much deeper shift in how we should think about freedom itself. For centuries, Western thought has defined freedom as the expansion of options. The Enlightenment of the 18th century, through thinkers like Immanuel Kant, argued that human progress was about emerging from a state of self-imposed immaturity, a state where we let others think for us. The motto was Sapere Aude, dare to know, or have the courage to use your own mind. This was a powerful and necessary revolution. But somewhere along the way, this profound idea of intellectual freedom got hijacked by consumer culture. Freedom of thought was confused with freedom of choice in the marketplace. Autonomy was flattened into the ability to choose between 200 breakfast cereals. We were sold a cheap, commercialized version of freedom, one that equated a good life with an endless shopping aisle. The paradox of choice exposes the lie at the heart of this dream. It shows us that limitless options don't lead to liberation, but to paralysis. It proves there's a massive difference between the political and intellectual freedom that allows us to pursue our own good life and the market freedom that just overwhelms us with trivial nonsense. This is where a modern enlightenment comes in. If the first enlightenment was about breaking free from external authorities, like the church and state, this new enlightenment is about breaking free from the internal chains forged by our culture of abundance. The ultimate act of courage today, the modern sapir odd, is to have the courage to limit your own choices. It is to use your reason not just to evaluate options, but to question if you even need so many options in the first place. This isn't deprivation. It's the highest form of autonomy. It is the deliberate act of curating your life, of choosing where to direct your precious attention, and refusing to let meaningless distractions hijack your well-being. This is true freedom. Freedom is not being able to choose from 1,000 trivial paths. Freedom is choosing a single path with purpose, and walking it without the constant, nagging anxiety that you should be somewhere else. It is the freedom from distraction, freedom from regret, freedom from the exhausting search for a mythical best. It's about trading the shallow freedom of infinite options for the deep freedom of commitment and focus. Choosing to have fewer, but better, friendships. Choosing to master one skill instead of dabbling in 20. Choosing to be content with a good enough life that is real and present, rather than forever chasing a perfect life that is always out of reach. We started this journey in a crowded supermarket aisle, paralyzed by cereal boxes. We've seen why that feeling is so universal, breaking down the psychology of decision fatigue, regret, and paralysis that defines so much of modern life. And we've laid out a practical toolkit to help you escape that trap. But the ultimate message is this: the belief that more choice equals more happiness is one of the most damaging myths of our time. The relentless pursuit of more has left us feeling with less. The solution isn't to get better at choosing from an infinite menu, but to have the wisdom and courage to write our own shorter menu. This is modern enlightenment. It is the conscious, powerful act of choosing depth over breadth, commitment over endless options, and contentment over a restless search for perfection. It's about finally realizing that the richest lives are not those with the most choices, but those with the most meaning. Thank you for joining me on this. If this message resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more videos about living an intentional life in our noisy world. And for one final act of reflection, I invite you to share in the comments one specific area of your life where you're going to consciously limit your choices starting today. Let's start this revolution of less together.